The day the stars went quiet, the morning shift at Nexus Station began like any other in the past 300 years. Commander Zara Kelnis, a tall Valtharian with silver skin and 6 arms, moved through the command center with practiced efficiency. Her species had been monitoring galactic traffic for centuries, and nothing surprised them anymore. Pirates, merchants, diplomatic convoys, they had seen it all. But today would be different. Today, the universe would remind them that they understood very little about the darkness between the stars. The first alarm came at 0847 station time. Lieutenant Corex, a young officer with barely a decade of service, stared at his display screen with confusion rather than concern. His translator implant worked perfectly, but the words he was reading made no sense. 12 military fleets, each containing over 500 vessels, had simply vanished from long-range sensors. Not destroyed, not retreating, vanished. As if they had never existed at all, Zara rushed to Corex's station, her multiple arms dancing across control panels with mechanical precision. The data streams showed impossible readings. The Krillian Third Fleet, last seen patrolling the Outer Rim, had disappeared without sending a single distress signal. The mighty Torgan battle group, known throughout the galaxy for their unbreakable formation tactics, had vanished mid-patrol. Even the legendary Nexari Deep Space Armada, equipped with the most advanced sensors in known space, had gone dark in the span of 30 seconds. But the truly terrifying part was what replaced them. Where massive fleets once patrolled, long-range sensors now detected something else. Ships, thousands upon thousands of ships, all identical in their sleek, black design. They moved without engine signatures, without heat trails, without any of the electromagnetic noise that every known vessel produced. They were ghosts made of metal and shadow, drifting through space like memories of wars never fought. Dr. Theron Vask arrived at the station within hours of the first reports. The elderly Zentari scientist had devoted his entire career to understanding impossible phenomena, but even his vast experience felt inadequate as he studied the incoming data. His 4 eyes, each capable of seeing different light spectrums, couldn't make sense of what the sensors were recording. The ghost ships appeared to be moving faster than light, but without entering hyperspace. They seemed to exist in multiple locations simultaneously, yet maintained perfect formation across vast distances. The emergency session of the Galactic Union Council convened on the neutral world of Harmony. Prime, representatives from 47 different species, gathered in the Great Hall, their translators working overtime as panic spread through multiple languages. Admiral Gorvak of the Krillian Navy demanded immediate military action. General Thresh of the Torgan Empire called for a full-scale evacuation of border systems. But it was Senator Lissa of the peaceful Eridani who asked the question that made everyone fall silent. What if we're not dealing with an invasion? What if this is something else entirely? The answer came from an unexpected source. Captain Renko of the merchant vessel Golden Wanderer had been running supplies to a mining colony when his ship encountered the Phantom Fleet. His message, transmitted through an old emergency beacon before his ship went dark, painted a picture that defied all logic. The ghost ships had surrounded his vessel without making any aggressive moves. They didn't respond to communication attempts, didn't scan his cargo, didn't demand surrender. They simply watched. For 3 hours, they watched, and then they let him go. But Renko had seen something during those 3 hours that changed everything. Markings on the hull of the nearest ghost ship, symbols that no translator could decode, but every historian recognized. They were ancient Earth markings, worn and faded, but unmistakable. The symbols that humanity had carried to the stars 5 centuries ago, before they had withdrawn from galactic politics and disappeared into the void. The revelation sent shockwaves through the council chambers. Girth, the small blue world that had been dismissed as primitive and irrelevant, had somehow built a fleet that defied the laws of physics. Humanity, which had been laughed at by advanced civilizations for their crude technology and violent nature, had returned with ships that could appear and disappear at will. The species that the galaxy had forgotten was suddenly impossible to ignore. Historical records were hastily retrieved from deep archives. 500 years ago, Earth had been a minor player in galactic politics. Humans had possessed crude fusion technology and basic space travel, nothing that impressed the advanced alien civilizations. When diplomatic relationships soured over territorial disputes and trade agreements, humanity had simply left. No dramatic exit, no threats of revenge, no final ultimatum. Earth had quietly withdrawn its ambassadors, recalled its merchant fleets, and sealed its borders. The galaxy had moved on, assuming that humanity would eventually collapse or fade into obscurity. But now, as reports continued to flood in from across known space, it became clear that Earth had been far from idle during its self-imposed exile. The ghost ships weren't just appearing randomly, they were positioned with surgical precision at key, strategic points throughout the galaxy. Trade routes, military installations, diplomatic stations, research facilities, everywhere that mattered, the Phantom Fleet was watching. They had mapped the entire galaxy, understood its politics, identified its weaknesses, and positioned themselves to control everything without firing a single shot. Commander, Zara found herself staring at a tactical display that showed the true scope of what they were facing. 20,000 ships, each one a technological marvel that surpassed anything in the galactic arsenal. But more terrifying than their numbers was their patience. The Ghost Fleet made no demands, issued no ultimatums, sent no communications. They simply existed, silent and watchful, like ancient guardians awakening from a long sleep. Dr. Vask worked through the night, analyzing every piece of data they had collected about the Phantom vessels. His calculations revealed something that made his blood run cold. The ships weren't just ignoring the laws of physics. They were operating according to principles that current science couldn't even theorize. They moved through space-time as if it were merely a suggestion rather than an absolute rule. They appeared to exist partially outside normal reality, phasing in and out of detection like shadows at twilight. But perhaps the most unsettling discovery came from deep space archaeologists working on the rim worlds. Ancient sites that had been dormant for millennia were suddenly showing signs of activity. Buried structures were powering up, sending signals into deep space using frequencies that matched the Phantom Fleet's energy signatures. The evidence suggested that humanity hadn't just returned to the galaxy. They had never really left. They had been watching, waiting, preparing for something that only they could see coming. As the first day of the Phantom Fleet's appearance drew to a close, one thing had become clear to every intelligence analyst in the galaxy. This wasn't an invasion in any traditional sense. The ghost ships had the power to destroy any opposition, yet they remained passive. They could have conquered entire systems in hours, yet they made no territorial claims. They could have crippled galactic civilization with a single coordinated strike, yet they simply watched and waited. The silence was the most terrifying part. In a galaxy accustomed to the noise of commerce, diplomacy, and conflict, the absolute quiet emanating from the Phantom Fleet felt like the calm before a storm that could reshape reality itself. 20,000 ships hung in the void like a question mark written across the stars, and the galaxy was beginning to realize that it might not like the answer when it finally came. The reckoning, the second phase, began exactly 72 hours after the Phantom Fleet's first appearance. Commander Zara was reviewing patrol reports when Lieutenant Corax burst into her office, his usually calm demeanor shattered by what he had witnessed. The ghost ships had moved. Not all of them, but enough to send ripples of terror through the galactic intelligence network. Specific vessels had detached from the main fleet and begun what could only be described as a hunting operation. The targets weren't random. Each ship that vanished from the galaxy's most wanted lists had something in common. They were captained by individuals with long histories of war crimes, slavery, or corruption. The notorious pirate Lord Vaxic the Ruthless, responsible for the massacre of entire colonies, disappeared from his heavily fortified base along with his entire fleet. Senator Corliss, who had embezzled billions of credits meant for refugee relief, vanished from his luxury yacht while traveling under heavy escort. General Thirac, architect of the genocide on Kepler 7, was taken from his command bunker on the most secure military installation in Krillian space. But here was the disturbing part. No one else was harmed. Vaxic's base had been staffed by thousands of pirates and mercenaries, yet only Vaxic himself had vanished. Senator Corliss's yacht had carried 50 crew members and guests, but only the senator had disappeared, leaving behind a ship full of confused but unharmed passengers. General Thirac's bunker had been protected by an entire regiment of elite soldiers, yet they found themselves mysteriously unconscious for exactly 30 minutes, awakening to discover that only their commander was gone. The precision was inhuman, or perhaps more human than anyone had expected. Each operation was carried out with surgical accuracy that spoke of detailed intelligence gathering and moral judgment calls that no computer could make. The Phantom Fleet wasn't just technologically superior, it was operating according to a code of ethics that prioritized justice over efficiency. Dr. Vask made the connection while analyzing energy signatures from the disappearance sites. The technology being used wasn't entirely unknown. It was evolved. 5 centuries of human isolation hadn't been spent in stagnation, but in dedicated research and development. Earth had taken their crude understanding of quantum mechanics and fusion technology and pushed it far beyond what any other species had thought possible. They had learned to manipulate space and time itself, but they had done so quietly, without fanfare, without boasting of their achievements to the galaxy. That had dismissed them. The archaeological team on Kepler X made a discovery that changed everything. While excavating ruins that predated galactic civilization, they uncovered a chamber that had been sealed for over 1,000 years. Inside, they found evidence of human presence dating back far earlier than official records indicated. Tool marks that matched human manufacturing techniques, writing samples in Proto-Earth languages, and most disturbing of all, star charts that accurately mapped the current political boundaries of the galaxy, despite being carved in stone before most of the participating civilizations had even developed space travel. The implications were staggering. Humanity hadn't just recently achieved advanced technology. They had been advanced for far longer than anyone had realized. Their withdrawal from galactic politics 5 centuries ago hadn't been a retreat of the weak, but a strategic decision by beings who could see further into the future than their contemporaries. They had stepped back not because they couldn't compete, but because they had already won a game that everyone else was still learning to play. On the 4th day, the Phantom Fleet finally broke its silence. The message came simultaneously to every communication device in the galaxy, delivered in perfect translation to each species' native language. The voice was calm, almost gentle, belonging to a human female who identified herself as Captain Sarah Chun of the Earth Expeditionary Force. "People of the galaxy," she began, her words carrying the weight of 5 centuries of patient observation. "We have watched. We have waited. We have seen the suffering caused by those who would abuse power, and we have decided that the time for silence has ended. We are not here as conquerors. We are here as ... correctors." The message continued with a precision that spoke of careful preparation. Earth had documented every major atrocity committed in the galaxy over the past 500 years. Every act of genocide, every slave trade operation, every corrupt official who had stolen from the desperate and the dying. They had names, dates, evidence, and locations for crimes that many thought had been forgotten or covered up. The galaxy's darkest secrets had been cataloged with the thoroughness of beings who had unlimited time and unprecedented access to information. But Captain Chun's message wasn't just a recitation of crimes. It was an ultimatum delivered with the calm certainty of someone holding an unbeatable hand. The galaxy could choose to reform itself, to create systems of justice and accountability. That would prevent future atrocities, or Earth would continue its corrections until the necessary changes were implemented. The choice was entirely up to the existing civilizations, but the consequences of inaction had been made brutally clear. Some species chose defiance. The Torgan Empire, built on a foundation of military conquest and brutal suppression of subject. Worlds declared war on humanity and launched their remaining fleets toward Earth's last known location. They never arrived. The entire armada, over 3,000 vessels strong, simply vanished during their journey. No battles were fought, no distress signals were sent, no wreckage was ever found. The Torgan Empire's military might, accumulated over centuries of expansion, had been erased as easily as deleting a file from a computer. Other civilizations chose a different path. The Eridani Confederation, already known for their peaceful nature, immediately began implementing the justice reforms that Earth had suggested. The Valtharian Union established new courts specifically designed to handle war crimes and corruption cases. The Xanthari Republic opened their historical archives and began prosecuting officials who had covered up past atrocities. These species found that their cooperation was rewarded. Phantom ships began appearing in their space as well, but as protectors rather than hunters. The true scope of Earth's transformation became clear when archaeological surveys were conducted on humanity's former colony worlds. Sites that had been abandoned 5 centuries ago were found to contain technology that defied contemporary understanding. Entire cities had been constructed underground, powered by energy sources that produced no waste and left no environmental impact. Manufacturing facilities capable of producing materials at the molecular level. Computing systems that appeared to process information faster than light itself could travel. But perhaps most impressive were the monitoring stations. Hidden throughout the galaxy, disguised as asteroids or debris fields, were thousands of observation posts that had been recording every significant event for the past 500 years. Earth hadn't withdrawn from galactic civilization. They had embedded themselves so deeply within it that they could observe everything while remaining completely invisible. They had turned invisibility into an art form and patience into a weapon. Commander Zara received the final piece of the puzzle when a phantom ship appeared directly outside Nexus Station. Not threatening, not demanding, simply ... present. The vessel's captain, a human male who appeared to be in his 40s, but carried himself with the confidence of someone far older, requested permission to come aboard. His name was David Park, and he carried the title of Cultural Exchange Coordinator. During their conversation, Park revealed the truth that many had suspected, but few had dared to voice. Earth's disappearance 5 centuries ago hadn't been permanent. It had been strategic. Humanity had recognized that the galaxy was heading toward a dark age of corruption and violence, and they had made the difficult decision to step back and prepare for the inevitable reckoning. They had spent 500 years not just advancing their technology, but evolving their understanding of justice, ethics, and the responsibilities that came with power. The Phantom Fleet wasn't Earth's military. It was Earth's diplomatic corps. Every ghost ship was crewed by humans who had dedicated their lives to studying galactic civilizations, understanding their cultures, learning their languages, and preparing for the day when intervention would become necessary. They were warriors, yes, but warriors in service of peace. They were judge and jury, but their verdicts were based on centuries of careful observation and moral consideration. As Park prepared to leave Nexus Station, he left Commander Zara with a final thought that would haunt her for years to come. "We never wanted to be the galaxy's guardians," he said, his voice carrying the weight of a species that had chosen responsibility over comfort. "We wanted to be your equals, your partners, your friends. But when the galaxy chose chaos over justice, someone had to remember what civilization really means. Someone had to be willing to stand in the darkness and hold the line." The Phantom Fleet had achieved its goals within 6 months of its appearance. War crimes tribunals were established on every major world. Corruption investigations led to the removal of thousands of officials across dozens of species. Slave trade operations were dismantled with surgical precision. The galaxy didn't become perfect overnight, but it began the long journey toward justice that Earth had been patiently waiting to guide. And somewhere in the depths of space, 20,000 ghost ships continued their eternal patrol, silent, guardians of a civilization that had finally remembered how to be civilized. They had vanished in silence, returned in silence, and would continue their watch in silence until the day when their vigilance was no longer needed. Earth had kept its promise to the galaxy, even when the galaxy had forgotten that the promise had ever been made.